I had just wrapped up a week-long hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. My buddies and I had planned this trip for months, and it was supposed to be a chance to disconnect from our hectic lives and enjoy nature. By the end of it, though, we were all worn out and ready to head home. I was the last one to leave, as I had agreed to drop off some gear for another friend who had left early. It was a little after 9 p.m. when I finally got on the road. I had about a 5-hour drive ahead of me, most of it through remote, winding mountain roads before I'd hit the highway. My GPS showed the quickest route, but I wasn't too familiar with it. I figured it would be fine, though. I'd driven through these mountains plenty of times before. The first couple of hours went by uneventfully. The roads were deserted, and the only light came from my headlights and the occasional glint of moonlight through the trees. The scenery, which had seemed so beautiful during the day, now felt eerie and oppressive in the dark. I had no cell signal, so I was relying entirely on my GPS. About an hour later, the road narrowed even further, the trees closing in on either side. My GPS showed that I was supposed to take a left onto a smaller road, one that didn't even have a name on the map. I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to follow the directions. I just wanted to get home. As soon as I made the turn, the atmosphere changed. The road was rougher, the trees denser, and the night darker. My headlights barely cut through the blackness. I felt a growing sense of unease, but told myself it was just the isolation getting to me. I drove on for another 20 minutes without seeing another car or sign of civilization. I started to wonder if I'd taken a wrong turn when I saw something up ahead, 3 pairs of taillights, moving slowly in the same direction. I sighed in relief, glad to see I wasn't the only one out here. As I got closer, I realized the vehicles were all black vans, identical in make and model. They were driving slowly, almost too slowly, and I couldn't figure out why. I thought about passing them, but the road was too narrow and the edges looked unstable. So I stayed behind them, keeping a reasonable distance. After a few minutes, the van started to slow down even more, almost to a crawl. I tapped my horn lightly, not wanting to be rude, but hoping to get them to speed up a bit. They didn't. Instead, all 3 vans came to a complete stop, blocking the road. I sat there, confused and growing more anxious by the second. The vans didn't move. No one got out. I started to wonder if they were broken down, but something about the way they had stopped felt deliberate, like they were waiting for something. I honked again, a little louder this time, and rolled down my window to call out, but the only sound that came back was the wind rustling through the trees. I leaned forward, trying to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. Movement in the shadows between the trees on either side of the road. I couldn't make out what it was, but there were figures, dark and indistinct, slipping in and out of the trees, moving closer to the vans. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I needed to get out of there. I threw the car into reverse and started backing up, but as soon as I did, the back doors of the first van swung open. A man stepped out, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by a hood. He stood there for a moment, then started walking toward my car. Panic surged through me. I floored the gas pedal, reversing as fast as I could, but then I heard the sound of tires screeching behind me. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw another van, identical to the others, pulling up behind me, cutting off my escape. I was trapped. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked around, searching for any way out. The figures in the trees were closer now, slipping through the darkness like shadows. The man from the van was almost at my car. I could see his face now, pale, expressionless, his eyes dark and empty. He reached out, his hand brushing against the hood of my car, and that's when I lost it. I slammed the car into drive, swerving around him and aiming for the narrow gap between the vans and the trees. My car scraped against the branches as I forced my way through, the sound of metal on wood grating in my ears. I didn't look back. I just kept driving, pushing the car as fast as it would go on the rough road. I could hear the other vans starting up behind me, their engines roaring as they gave chase. For what felt like an eternity, I drove like a madman, taking turns at breakneck speed, barely keeping control of the car. The vans stayed on my tail, their headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. Every time I looked in the mirror, they were there, relentless, unyielding. I don't know how long I drove like that, but eventually, I saw a light up ahead. the faint glow of a small town. I pushed the car even harder, the engine whining in protest, but I didn't care. I just needed to reach that light, to get away from the nightmare behind me. As soon as I hit the town's main street, the vans behind me vanished. I didn't see them turn off or slow down, they were just gone. I pulled into the first gas station I saw, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm down, trying to make sense of what had just happened. But I couldn't. The whole thing felt unreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The next day, I took my car to a mechanic to check the damage. The scrapes and dents were real enough, proof that it hadn't been just in my head. But when I asked the locals about the road I had taken, they looked at me like I was crazy. No one knew of any such road leading into the mountains, and there were no towns nearby that matched the one I had driven through. To this day, I don't know what I encountered on that road, or who, or what was in those vans. All I know is that I'll never drive through those mountains at night again. Some roads are better left untraveled, especially when they lead to places that shouldn't exist.
It was a late Friday night, and I was driving from a work conference in Washington, D.C. back to my apartment in Richmond, Virginia. The drive was about 2 hours long, but after a grueling day of meetings and networking, I was already running on fumes. The conference had gone well, but all I wanted now was to be back in my own bed. As I merged onto the I-95 South, the familiar hum of the tires on the pavement began to lull me into a state of uneasy relaxation. The highway was nearly deserted, save for the occasional pair of headlights far in the distance. The road stretched out in front of me like a black ribbon, cutting through the night. I turned up the radio, hoping some music might help keep me awake, but the stations were full of static this far out from the city. I settled on an old rock station, the only one that came in clearly, and tried to focus on the road. About an hour into the drive, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror rapidly approaching. They were getting closer, and soon the car was right behind me, tailgating with its high beams on. Annoyed, I switched lanes to let them pass, but the car followed me, staying right on my bumper. I tried to ignore it, but after a few minutes I couldn't take it anymore. I slowed down, hoping they would just pass me, but instead they slowed down too, matching my speed. Now I was getting nervous. There was no reason for them to be doing this. We were the only two cars on this stretch of highway. The thought of pulling over crossed my mind, but the idea of stopping on a deserted road with this creep right behind me felt even worse. I decided to speed up, hoping to lose them, but no matter how fast I went, they stayed right on me. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the headlights behind me veered sharply to the right and sped off onto an exit ramp. I watched in my mirror as the taillights disappeared into the night. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was just some jerk trying to scare me. I tried to shake it off, but the unease lingered. About 20 minutes later, I reached a stretch of highway surrounded by dense woods on either side. The road here was darker, the trees casting long shadows across the asphalt. My phone buzzed with a low battery warning, and I realized I hadn't charged it before leaving the hotel. The thought of being stranded on this road without a working phone made my skin crawl. I was about to pull over at the next rest stop to charge it when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart across the road. It was quick, just a blur, but I swerved instinctively, narrowly missing whatever it was. My heart was in my throat as I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I sat there for a moment, trying to calm myself down. The woods were eerily quiet, the only sound the ticking of my car's cooling engine. I looked around, but there was nothing in sight. No movement, no animals, nothing. It was as if whatever had crossed the road had vanished into thin air. After a few minutes, I convinced myself it was probably just a deer or a raccoon. I needed to keep moving. I started the car again, but as soon as I pulled back onto the road, my headlights illuminated something that made my blood run cold. Standing in the middle of the road, about 100 feet ahead, was a figure. At first I thought it was a person, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. It was tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally long, and it seemed to be wearing some kind of tattered clothing. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, staring at my car. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching on the pavement. The figure didn't budge. It was too dark to see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for my phone, but when I looked down at the screen, it was dead. Panic set in. I couldn't just sit there, I needed to get out of there. I threw the car into reverse, but as soon as I did, the figure began to move toward me. Slowly at first, but then faster, its long limbs moving in jerky, unnatural motions. I floored the gas pedal, the car lurching backward, but the figure kept coming, faster and faster. My breath caught in my throat as I spun the wheel, trying to turn the car around. But the narrow road and the trees on either side made it nearly impossible. The figure was almost at my car now, its movements frantic and aggressive. I could see it more clearly in the headlights, and it was worse than I had imagined. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, its eyes sunken and hollow. There was something terribly wrong about it, something that made every instinct in my body scream to get away. With a desperate lurch, I managed to turn the car around and hit the gas. The tires spun on the wet pavement before finally catching, and I sped down the road, the figure disappearing into the distance behind me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the wheel steady. I drove as fast as I could, not caring about the speed limit, not caring about anything except putting as much distance between me and that thing as possible. I didn't slow down until I saw the lights of a gas station up ahead. I pulled in, my heart still racing, and parked under the bright fluorescent lights. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm down, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure again, coming toward me out of the darkness. I never did figure out what it was. The next morning, I tried to rationalize it as some kind of prank, maybe someone in a costume trying to scare drivers. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Whatever I saw that night wasn't human, and it wasn't something I ever wanted to encounter again. I still drive that stretch of road sometimes, but I make sure to do it during the day. Because at night, in the dark, you never know what might be out there waiting for you on the long road to terror.
I had just landed my dream job, but it was halfway across the country in California. The idea of flying never sat well with me, so I decided to make the drive from Colorado. It was a long journey, almost 1,000 miles, but I figured I could break it up into 2 days and enjoy the sights along the way. I set off early in the morning, with the first leg of my trip taking me through the Rocky Mountains. The drive was beautiful, with winding roads and breathtaking views. But as the sun began to set, the beauty gave way to something more ominous. The roads became narrower, the curves sharper, and the trees taller and denser. By the time night fell, I was in the middle of nowhere, with no other cars in sight and nothing but the pitch-black forest on either side. I was starting to feel the fatigue setting in, but I was determined to make it to the small town where I had booked a motel for the night. It was still another 2 hours away, and I wasn't sure I had the energy to make it. But there wasn't anywhere to pull over and rest, so I kept driving, hoping the darkness would pass soon. As I drove through the winding mountain roads, I suddenly noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. They were far off in the distance, just a faint glow against the dark road. I didn't think much of it at first, but as the minutes passed, the lights got closer, faster than they should have. Soon, they were right behind me, blindingly bright. I figured the driver would eventually pass me, but they didn't. They just stayed right on my bumper, their lights shining directly into my mirrors. I slowed down, hoping they'd take the hint and go around, but instead, they matched my speed. I was starting to get a bad feeling, the kind of gut instinct that tells you something isn't right. I sped up, trying to put some distance between us, but the car behind me sped up too. The road was too narrow and winding to outrun them, and I could feel the panic setting in. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt, and my heart was racing. I glanced in the rearview mirror again and saw a flash of movement. It wasn't just one person in that car. There were at least two, and they were leaning out of the windows, gesturing wildly at me. Then, without warning, the car behind me swerved to the side and sped up, pulling up alongside me. I could see the driver now, a man in his late 30s, with a wild look in his eyes. He was shouting something, but I couldn't make out the words over the roar of the engine and the wind. His passenger, another man, was holding something in his hand. It looked like a crowbar. I realized in that moment that they weren't just trying to scare me. They were trying to run me off the road. I hit the gas, my car lurching forward as I tried to outrun them. But they were relentless, matching my speed and swerving dangerously close to my car. I tried to stay calm, but my mind was racing. If they forced me off the road, there was no telling what would happen next. Finally, I saw a sign up ahead, a gas station, just a mile away. I didn't think twice. I floored it, my car speeding down the winding road as I raced toward the gas station. The car beside me swerved again, trying to cut me off, but I veered to the side, narrowly avoiding them. The gas station came into view, and I didn't slow down until I was pulling into the brightly lit parking lot. The car that had been chasing me sped past, their tires screeching as they missed the turnoff. I watched as they disappeared into the darkness, the red glow of their taillights fading away. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to catch my breath. My hands were still shaking as I turned off the engine. The gas station was quiet, with only a couple of trucks parked off to the side. I quickly got out of the car and went inside, the bright fluorescent lights a welcome contrast to the darkness outside. The clerk behind the counter looked up as I walked in, giving me a nod. I must have looked as terrified as I felt because he immediately asked if I was okay. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words wouldn't come out right. He seemed to understand, though, and offered to call the police. I agreed, and within minutes, a police cruiser pulled up outside. The officer took my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. The car had no plates, and in the dark, I hadn't been able to get a good look at the drivers. They assured me they would keep an eye out, but I knew the odds of catching them were slim. I spent the rest of the night at the gas station, too scared to get back on the road. When morning came, I thanked the clerk and the officer, and cautiously continued my journey. I never saw those men again, but the memory of that night stayed with me. Even now, whenever I drive down a dark, empty road, I can't help but glance in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those headlights bearing down on me again.